So, should we bring in the closer?
I
And
think it'd be a good time for that.
all right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 51. We're over the 50 episode mark of Free Baseball Podcast, presented by the Athletes Hub and presented by me, Davis Bird, and my wonderful co-host, as always, Jake Crumpler. Baseball is back. And it's like well and truly back now because spring training's like in the throes of it, and the World Baseball Classic is just now kicking off. I guess it's like weird to say kicking off because it's a different sport analogy, but the World Baseball Classic is here. We're excited. It's why we've actually like 40 minutes late because we've literally just been over here looking at the rosters and saying cool player names. Like
That's what you've been doing.
That's what I've been doing.
I've been slacking and catching up on writing up the bringing the closer.
Yeah, so we've been looking at WBC rosters, but what are your first thoughts just from the first couple games that have been played of the WBC? What matchups are you excited to see? What are the things you're hoping to get from the World Baseball Classic?
What I'm excited to see, what I've seen so far, I watched the Cuba versus Netherlands game last night. I think the first thing that I noticed was it sort of had those spring training vibes of, oh yes, I finally get to see this major league player in action again. First time you've seen them for some guys since September. So it was cool to see some of the major league players on Cuba and Netherlands get back out there. I think it's also cool just to see them have different teammates or have guys be playing with guys from other major league teams. For Team Cuba, that's not really the case. They got Yohan Moncada and Luis Robert. That's like their two big guys. And they also have Yoenis Cespedes, but those two guys are already on the same team. So it's sort of just like the White Sox and a bunch of random dudes. But yeah, I think that's cool. I also think it's cool to just like sort of have different environments. That game was played in Taiwan, I think, and they just had much different fans around there. I think there's lots of traveling fans as well. So that was really fun. I think what I'm excited for is to just see the competitiveness that you usually don't see this early in the season. This sort of has a playoff feel, and you don't get that in spring training. You usually don't even get that until September at the earliest. So this is sort of the most competitive baseball we're going to see for a while. And it's the first competitive baseball we've seen since the World Series ended. And yeah, it's been really cool. The biggest thing I think is the lack of the rules changes that they're using. So it's like no pitch clock, no any of the new stuff, no shift thing. So it's like the games are super long and they're longer than usual games. And I don't know what the reason with that is. It's probably because of the pitch limitations leading to more pitch changes and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it's just getting kicked off right now. It's sort of it's sort of a slow rise towards the semifinals and the finals when things start really getting exciting.
Yeah, it's just exciting. Like I've literally been sitting here while Jake's been writing, just looking at the different rosters for the teams and seeing like what random players are playing for what random teams and what like ex-major leaguers and guys. Like it's been like a prime, hey, remember this guy kind of bit for me. But yeah, I'm obviously excited to see Team USA play because they're one of the favorites, if not the favorite amongst the entirety of the teams. But also because we made the predictions. If you want to go back and look at our articles that we've written about it for our way too early predictions, none of us, except for the one non-American, chose the U.S. as the team to beat. And I'm really excited for Team Japan. There's just so many fun players that will most likely end up making the jump in the next few years to the major leagues. We've already talked about them at length, so go back and check our other podcasts or go read that article if you want to hear more about it. But it's cool too because you see guys like that you see in other leagues really tear it up. Like I was talking about Team Korea and Baiko Kong, and I don't even remember what team he's on. I think it was I think I said it was the Netherlands where they have Vladimir Valentin, and he's like NPB's like all-time home run leader or something.
WBC's all-time home run leader.
WBC's like all-time home run leader. I think he's the NPB's all-time home run leader for a foreign player.
He's close. He's behind like Tuffy Rhodes and some random dudes like that. Yeah, but he's up there. He's like at least top 10, probably top 5. He's got like over 300 home runs in MPB.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that guy, he's like just a really like little guy, and he hits tanks. Like he's like a muscle hamster. He hits like tape measure home runs in MPB.
He hit one last night. I was telling you, he hit one last night. That the wind at that ballpark in Taiwan, I don't know if it was blowing in from left field or what, or if they're using the balls that they were using in the major leagues last year, but there were a few balls hit last night that really should have gotten out that I thought were guaranteed home runs that died at the warning track. So the first home run we saw was in the game today that was played this morning between Chinese Taipei and Panama. Panama almost mercy ruled Chinese Taipei. There's a rule for after 7 innings, if like after the completion of the seventh or eighth inning, if the team is up by 10 runs, it's over. And I think it's the same for after starting with the 5th inning, that if you're up by 15 runs, it'll end. But yeah, they're so doing that. And Panama was the away team, so they'd be batting in the top half. They'd get up by 10, and then Chinese Taipei would come back and score a run to like keep the game alive. And it actually made it through 9 innings, despite there being like 2 opportunities for the game to end. And one of those opportunities was ruined, or I wouldn't say ruined if you're a Chinese Taipei fan, was a guy hitting the first home run in the WBC. I need to find his name. It was a Chinese Taipei name, so it's not something that I remembered. N. Wu. Nian Ting Wu. Nice. Congratulations, bruv.
Who did he hit it off of?
He hit it off of some guy that pitches for Panama.
Some dude.
Pereira. Wilfredo Pereira. 23-year-old.
God.
Yeah. So that game was pretty cool because Panama was absolutely going off on the offensive end, and it's not like their team is loaded with any guys. I'm pretty sure the MLB.com article writing about the best player on each World Baseball Classic team, they mentioned Jose Ramos as Team Panama's best player, and he's like the number 23 prospect in the Dodger system, which is weird because they do have major leaguers like Jonathan Arauz and Rafael Betancourt and former guys like Ruben Tejada, and they still chose that guy. But they were going off. This is their first time in the WBC for 2 iterations. They missed out on the last 2, and they qualified this year. So it's been like 14 years. So they're playing. This could be, I don't know if you remember last time when Netherlands took out Dominican Republic and they made it to the Final Four. So this could be that sneaky team that sort of just plays with a bunch of fire and just comes out of nowhere and knocks off a big team.
Yeah, I think they beat them 12-5, and I saw a thing that was like the game was like 4 hours and something.
Yeah.
Another cool moment. We don't have our resident Yanks fans, but Mariano Rivera threw out the first pitch to Chien-Min Wang. So that's a cool little moment there. But yeah, WBC is going to be really cool. Keep checking back in with us every pod, and we will talk about it more. There's a lot of other stuff to talk about, spring training storylines. What do you really want to touch on here for spring training? Because there's been a lot to talk about.
I honestly don't know. I put just spring training storylines, and I thought something would come to my head. There's been some injuries. I know some guys are going to be delayed to the start of their season, like Tyler Glass now I know is one of them. And there's a couple other guys like that. I think Brendan Rodgers and Lucas Gilbreth of the Rockies are both
Brendan Rodgers
for the whole season.
Brendan Rodgers, I think they pretty much said was probably done for the full
if he
season.
Gets the surgery. Gilbreth already is ruled out for the rest of the season. But yeah, I mean, there's injury news that's not really fun to talk about, when you want to have a fun time talking about baseball. Yeah, this sucks, this guy's injured. But other than that, it's sort of like come to a dull roar right now with spring training, just because there's so much going on outside of spring training with, like I said, the injuries, but also with the WBC and I don't know, fantasy drafts going on. I think not many people are focused on, what's going on in Arizona and Florida right now. But it was funny to see the regular MLB teams face the WBC teams. We were talking about the Giants facing the Team USA, and the Team USA lineup was just the Team USA lineup was crazy, and I was like, "Oh no, the Giants are dead." Team Israel is facing the Marlins. Yeah,
the Team Israel will probably beat the Marlins. That lineup can't score any runs.
They got the Jewish blood in them. Of course they're going to. Let's see how those games are going right now. Giants are winning 2-0 against a lineup for Team USA that features Mookie Betts, Mike Trout, Kyle Schwarber, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Kyle Tucker, Trey Turner, JT Realmuto, and Jeff McNeil.
Who is the starter for the U.S.?
Miles Mikolas.
That's probably why, because he's garbage.
Team Israel Sorry for interrupting. Team Israel lost to the Marlins 11-5. That's because their best player is playing on the Giants right now against Team USA. And also, I think the only team that lost, or there were two teams that lost to the WBC teams, and that's the Mets losing to Team Nicaragua 2-0, which Team Nicaragua has Chesler Cuthbert and Christian Vasquez, Jose Moreno, and the big bad Mets lost to them with Max Scherzer starting. He struck out 9 batters in 3 innings, and then also
he's in 3 innings. He basically struck out
also,
everybody.
The A's lost to Team Colombia, whose best player is Hanley Ramirez.
No.
And Gio Urshela. Yeah. So it's it's fun. The A's are going to be so bad this year. My grandpa called me the other day. This spring training storylines right now is just like, oh, let's just talk about baseball. My grandpa the other day, it was his birthday, so I called him to say happy birthday. And he knows like I'm a big baseball guy. He always tries to talk baseball with me. He's always like, oh, I read this thing in the newspaper. I'm like, you boomer reading the newspaper. He's way past boomer. He's like 88 now, but nonetheless, he was like,
shout out to Jake's grandpa. He just got called
Marvin Cohen
by your grandson.
Famous physicist Marvin Cohen. Google him. He's got a Wikipedia page. Nonetheless, he was like talking about the A's because he like read about them in the newspaper, talking about Shintaro Fujinami and Shohei Ohtani. And I was like, oh yeah, they went to the same high school. And he was like, oh yeah, well the A's like, they got to be better than last year, right? Like last year they were so bad. And I was just like, no. And he was just like, well, what do you mean? Like they added some guys, right? I was like, yes, but they also traded away a bunch of guys. He was like, well, like there's no chance that they're going to be worse than last year. I was like, yeah, they probably are guaranteed to be worse than last year. They're going to be so bad. And this should be a lot of fun.
Laughably bad for the A's. Mm-hmm. The A's would probably lose to almost everybody on any given day. They're so bad. Spring training storylines. Current leader and still undefeated. Boston Red Sox 8-0.
Wow.
Yeah, they're 8-0.
Preparing to get last place.
I don't know what division they're in because it's like the Cactus League and the Grapefruit League. I think they're in the
Grapefruit because that's Florida.
Yeah, they're in the Grapefruit League. Yeah, who do you think, without looking, Jake, is leading the Cactus League?
In wins?
Yeah, in wins. In the standings.
Well, if a last place team in the AL East is leading I don't even know who's in the Cactus League, actually. That's going to be the hardest part. I'm just going to say Diamondbacks. They're playing
at home. It's the Royals, Jake. It's the Royals. They're 10-2. 10-2, Jake.
They're like playing without Vinny Pasquantino, who's on Team Italy.
Mm-hmm. Don't need him. Never needed him in the first place.
Who's got the most home runs in
that's a
spring training?
I've dropped my phone.
All right, I got it up. Who do you want to guess? It's one guy. He's got 4.
Is he a prospect or big leaguer?
Big leaguer. Sort of a little bit of both.
Man, I don't know.
AL West.
Prospect. Oh God. It's probably someone stupid like Jared Kelenic or Joe.
That is who it is. Nice job. Well done. Nice. Yeah, Jared Kelenic. He's got 4. There's like 20 guys with 3.
That's so sick.
One of them, though, is Jordan Walker, my NL Rookie of the Year award pick. He is getting a lot of shut up. He's getting a lot of helium right now. This is like the Julio of last year, where it didn't seem like he had room to make the roster, and then he just had a crazy spring, made the roster, and was just the next big star in baseball. I think that's what's happening here with Jordan Walker. So if you're listening to this and you're in my fantasy leagues, Jordan Walker sucks. But if you're listening to this and you're not in my fantasy leagues,
if you're in this,
draft that boy.
If you're watching this and you're just a baseball fan, Jordan Walker sucks.
No, that's for Cubs fans. Cubs fans.
He stinks. And speaking of Cubs fans, it's enough spring training. Let's continue our offseason review.
Mhm.
Last week we did the AL Central, where we could talk about the spring training champions, the unbeatable Kansas City Royals, at length, and how bad all of the AL Central's off seasons were. I think we gave like one grade that wasn't an F. It was a really kind of dreary episode for our 50th anniversary because the AL Central was so dog shit, for lack of a better term. They were horrible. So we're going to talk about the NL Central, which hopefully will not be as miserable. But that's going to have to wait because we're going to have to talk about the Cincinnati Reds, who may or may not. I don't think they're going to be quite at the level of the A's in terms of the suckitude factor, but they're going to be terrible still. And it's aided by an offseason like this. Their big additions are Nick Solak and Kevin Newman from trades. They added Luke Miley, Kurt Casale, Will Myers, Luke Weaver, all through free agency. They also added Will Benson through a trade. And then the last two were Daniel Norris and Hunter Strickland through free agency, a real who's who of guys that play baseball and have been playing baseball for a lot more years than they probably should have. And then their big subtractions from their absolutely ace roster from last year are Austin Romine, Justin Wilson, Donovan Solano. They also lost Mike Minor, Kyle Farmer, Jeff Hoffman, Aristides Aquino, the Punisher. God, what happened to him? Art Warren and Mike Moustakis, all through free agency. They didn't extend anybody because we're talking about the Reds. Yeah, this was an off season. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
This was an off season. This was one of the off seasons.
This was one of the off seasons that a baseball team had this winter. Yeah, how are you feeling about the Reds' chances? I don't really.
Oh, their chances?
Their chances are horrible. How do you feel about their off season?
Yeah, you gotta format that question differently.
Yeah, their chances are miserable.
Yeah, it's a difficult discussion to have about the Reds. There's multiple levels to this. The first level is their owner is a cheapskate. Their president of baseball operations has no money to work with. You can't really blame them. And, the Reds are just an organization that you can't really root for right now because the people that run it don't believe in it. And they're just sort of using it to make some money. They don't really care about the product on the field. So that's level one. Level two is that they were really bad last year. You can't expect them to add enough this offseason to become a competitor, or if they did so, you might think they're stupider than what they've done, right? If a team that was super bad, like if the Royals just were like, we're getting who were the big free agents this offseason? Like we're getting Carlos Correa,
all of the shortstops.
Yeah, we're getting all the shortstops,
Judge.
And then we're still going to be really bad because we don't have anybody to build around. Our pitching staff is awful. So you can't expect them to do that. And then the third level is what they actually did this offseason. So what they did was they added some guys that have some high upside. They added some guys that they could use as trade bait, and they didn't really lose anybody that you're that concerned about. I do like the addition of Nick Solak. I like the addition of Will Benson, a couple of guys that you can think about having on the team going forward. And then you have guys like Will Myers, Luke Weaver, Kevin Newman, Kurt Casale, guys that are going to be on the team for half the year and likely be traded soon after that, which is great. That gets you more prospects. I think Will Myers is probably the best of those additions. He really feels to me like the Brandon Drury of 2023, whereas he goes to Cincinnati, which is starting to become more well-known as the second best hitter park in all of baseball behind Coors Field. It's basically like Coors Field Light, which is Coors Light a thing? I don't drink beer.
It is.
All right. They're Coors Light. They need to be renamed to Coors Light. Nonetheless, it's like what they did there is solid. I wish they had maybe traded somebody bigger, but they don't really have anybody big to trade, So you can't really blame them for not bringing in a bunch of minor league talent or whatever and sort of having an influx of that kind of prospect hype into their organization. But they did that last at the trade deadline, trading away Luis Castillo. That got them a bunch of prospects, and I think they traded a couple other guys. So I'm sort of fine with their additions. It's nothing exciting. And then they didn't lose anybody that I care about at all. It's a bunch of random veterans like Romine, Wilson, Solano, Minor, Hoffman, and that's about it. Farmer was useful the past couple of seasons, and Aquino and Art Warren are sort of guys that have a lot of potential, but the Reds have not been able to tap into it. And we all know Moustakas has been struggling with injuries. So I'm sort of fine with their offseason. It's nothing exciting. It's a C for me.
Yeah, I'm pretty stout on the C as well. I like a couple of their free agent additions, and like how you mentioned Will Myers. Will Myers is going to go from Petco, which is one of the most hitter unfriendly parks in all of baseball, where he hit 7 home runs last year. He would have hit 15 according to Statcast if he had been playing the entire season.
And how many games did he play last year?
In Great American, he didn't even play that many, I don't think.
Yeah.
I need to look that up. I also really like Solak. I think that was a really good pickup because they didn't really – I don't think they gave up anything for him. It might have been cash considerations if I'm remembering correctly.
Bro, he's an all-star.
Yeah, cash considerations is really good. Yeah, Will Myers played 77 games. He would have hit 15 home runs in 77 games.
That's a 30 home run pace.
Yeah, it is. So, I really like that. I do really like the Brandon Drury comparison. And honestly, the Reds have gotten pretty good at that because their offensive environment allows a player like that to flourish and really have sort of a bounce back year and look good. Even relative, Drury was still fine when he got traded, but he wasn't as good, obviously, because he literally went from – he did a reverse Will Myers. He literally went from Great American to small. I really like Great American Small Park. You always say that one. He went from Great American Small Park to Petco, which is a cavern, and his offensive numbers dropped off. But of course, they're going to. I really like that move on the regards for Will Myers. I also really, really like what they did in terms of getting Kurt Casale. Getting Kurt Casale and Luke Miley, because they're both good, more defensive-minded catchers. And Kurt Casale is a dude that's kind of been around for a while and is sort of really highly regarded in terms of being one of the best catchers in terms of helping a pitching staff. He's just good. He's got the Mathis factor about him. And I think that's going to be one of the things that you actually have to look forward to if you are, in fact, one of the poor souls that has chosen to root for the Cincinnati Reds, because you can look at Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo and anyone else that they're going to end up bringing up. They probably don't really do that much else. I know they have a couple other guys like Brandon Williamson who will probably come up. Maybe Connor Phillips, you could see, but Hunter Green is what you have to look forward to. I don't really see them bringing up many great hitting prospects this year because they're going to obviously try to keep them in the minors. But for the rotation-wise, Lodolo and Green are going to get a lot of help from Casale. I really like that portion of their offseason. Losing Moustakas on paper, a couple years ago, would be wow, that sucks. But Moustakas has played 4 games in 4 years or something like that is what it feels like. He just can't – he doesn't play baseball, so what's the point of having him? They've got some relatively interesting prospects that could come up too. So in terms of their season outlook, I think they got Spencer Steer. Who was he on that got traded there?
Twins,
that's right. You said that was an A's guy. He ended up on the Reds. He ended up on the
I called he was going to be traded.
Yeah, you did call he was going to be traded. That was a good call. So, yeah, maybe Noel V. Marte comes up. Maybe Ellie De La Cruz. I highly doubt that one. But, yeah, I think this offseason they added some guys that they can probably get some value for if they trade them. I'm still really, really high on the Casale signing just because Hunter Green, getting him all the help he can get because he's special. And Lodolo can be really, really good as well. I like that. I think, they obviously didn't sign anyone big because they're never going to, even if they were contending. It's the Reds. But the moves they made, I think, were solid given what they have to work with, because what they have to work with is nothing.
Yeah, great points all around. I can't disagree with any of it. Love me some Kurt Casale.
Yeah, Giants. Forever Giant. Giant, Kurt Casale.
Same with Carlos Correa and Arson Judge.
Oh, yeah. Moving on to everyone's favorite lovable loser, the Pittsburgh Pirates. They added a bunch of guys through free agency and from a couple trades. They picked up G-Man Choi and Connor Joe, both through trades, and then they added a laundry list of free agents that play baseball for some teams. They got Carlos Santana, Arlene Garcia, Vince Velasquez, Austin Hedges. They also added Tyler Chatwood, Caleb Smith, and then the big daddy of them all, the grand return of Andrew McCutchen to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And then the subtractions, they didn't really lose much of anything. They lost Ben Gamble and Roberto Perez to free agency. And then they traded away Kevin Newman and Bryce Wilson. So, yeah, I mean,
Bro,
I
you
don't know.
skipped over Dick Mountain.
Oh yeah, I didn't even see him in the thing though.
He's right below Chatwood,
Oh,
above
was he?
McCutcheon.
There he is. Yeah, they got Dick Mountain, Rich Hill. They get an A just for getting Rich Hill and Andrew
Yeah.
McCutcheon for me. They got guys that are fun, and I think the biggest part of the Pirates adding on in their offseason was because they were in the bad but fun category with O'Neal Cruz and Bednar and the circus that is Pittsburgh Pirates. So, yeah, I mean, how are you feeling on Pittsburgh?
Not too great for their chances this season. I think this is another situation where it's similar to the Reds. The ownership is awful. This might be the worst
Bob
owner in all of
Nutting is
baseball.
terrible.
Yeah, awful, awful owner right there. But the front office sort of has done the best that they can with what they've got. They've got one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. They're not going to compete this year. That's another parallel that they have between the Reds. They were really bad last year. They're not going to take a big step forward this year. And they're still sort of a couple years away from having that influx of minor league talent really take over. So adding some veterans like this that you can trade, that you can use to tutor and mentor the young players on the team while also making it more fun is a great idea. G-Man Choi, a lot of fun. Love me some Carlos Santana, always have.
I do too.
Giving Vince Velasquez a shot and making him like your big free agent acquisition, I think is really funny. But outside of that, bringing Andrew McCutcheon back is dope. I think it's awesome. It's going to be sick to see him back in the black and yellow. And Rich Hill is a great addition to any team. And I think the trade for Connor Joe is probably not going to be too impactful. I think the fact that he fell off last year playing in Colorado, that one season he had, was probably a fluke. Nonetheless, he'll have an opportunity to play off the bench. And man, they got Austin Hedges. This might be his last year in baseball if we get robot umpires next year or in the near future. And I think what makes me consider this, I'm honestly leaning B because I do like the guys that they added on their team, not in a baseball sense, but in that they're fun.
Mm-hmm.
What's helping me lean that way is that they lost nobody. Like Ben Gamel, who cares? Roberto Perez, I mean, he's on the Giants, so I care, but I don't think anybody else does. Bryce Wilson has like a career 5 ERA, and Kevin Newman, like, I don't think could hit a home run out in Cincinnati where he's going to be playing. So it's not like they lost anybody, and so they added. I'm glad that they added. They could have easily just done nothing, like we've seen some other teams do. So I'm actually going to be here. I slightly like this offseason more than the Reds offseason, even though they didn't really add prospect capital. I think they did a good job by adding a bunch of fun veterans that could not only make the team a little bit better, can make the team better in the future with trades, but also make them more fun right now.
Yeah, I like B, but I think I'm gonna go C just because they added some fun guys, but they added a lot of guys too that are like not head scratchers, but also guys that just literally don't move the needle in the slightest. Like Harleen Garcia is one of the most average relievers that they could have possibly got.
No, wrong.
No, I'm not really bullish.
Forever
on that
Giant.
Guy. Forever Giant, Harleen Garcia. Vince Velasquez as your big free agent signing is very funny. Austin Hedges is garbage. Connor Joe is also probably in the garbage tier. Tyler Chatwood somehow was relatively serviceable last year when he actually played, which is very funny to me as a Cubs fan. Caleb Smith, too, has been like, he is a guy. There's not a whole lot really to care about there.
He is a guy.
But I'm really, really thrilled about G-Man Choi, Carlos Santana, and then obviously Rich Hill and McCutcheon. Those guys are really fun veterans, but a couple of them are like at the point where they're like very, very much past it. Like I would like to see really what they have left to give other than veteran leadership. But at the same time, like the veteran leadership for this team is like, this isn't a young team that's really going anywhere. It's just sort of an amalgamation of guys that exist in the Pirates franchise. Because like they got O'Neal Cruz, but are they really going to be giving legitimate time to like Liover Peguero? Are they going to call up Quinn Priester? Are they going to call up like Andy Rodriguez or any of the other guys?
They should. And he is so good. And they got Austin Hedges blocking him.
That's the thing. They've got all these guys that they could call up. You know, G1 Bay, Henry Davis, Quinn Priester. They've got like Andy Rodriguez. they have so many guys that they could call up, and you just know they aren't. You just know they won't. You just know that the Pirates are not going to do that because they're franchise owned by Bob Nutting. So there's just going to be a bunch of dudes. So that's why I'm leaning C. If it's these guys are going to be veterans that are going to be on the team and provide leadership, and maybe you get something for them if you trade them at the deadline. Like, wasn't Carlos Santana Royal at the start of last season? And then he got traded to the Mariners. If you have guys that are more or less in that situation where you're going to flip them when it's time and you're going to call up your young guys and give them legitimate playing time, sure. But this is the Pirates we're talking about. And you just know that they're going to end up overstaying their welcome when guys that need to be getting playing time aren't going to. That's my big issue with it. So I'm going to lean C. The guys are very fun. McCutchen is really fun. I hope he gets to play, and I hope he has a good season. I'm obviously a rival fan because I like the Cubs, but I like the Pirates. They're very fun. David Bednar is one of my favorite players. I really, really enjoy the Pirates. I hope they have a good season, but I don't trust the leadership behind the Pittsburgh Pirates to make the most of what they got.
Yep. Very fair points. I just don't think there's much they could do to sort of push the team in any direction.
I don't think they could have either. It's annoying because they have a lot of guys that are ready to come into the team and play. And I'm just afraid that a lot of these guys that they ended up signing are going to be taking away that playing time that these young guys need to be getting. And if you're going to have your young guys in there, like if Rich Hill, you signed him and that's going to take away a rotation spot from Quinn Priester, that move is garbage. There's no reason for you to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're going to have Rich Hill there and still have a rotation spot for Quinn Priester or whatever other young pitcher you're going to bring in, and like, hey, look, Rich Hill, one of the most, he has not been like a Cy Young level freak pitcher forever, but he's been rock steady his whole career. If that's like a good veteran that you can have come in and help your young pitchers and guys that you bring up, that's an awesome move. But if you have these guys like McCutchen and Rich Hill and Carlos Santana taking away roster spots from guys that are young that need to be playing at the big league level and getting experience, so the Pirates, when their golden generation supposedly is ready to take the next step, that move kind of sucks. That's why I'm leaning C. I do love the guys. I love Rich Hill. Don't get me wrong. I love G-Man Choi too. So that's more why I'm bullish on a C rather than a B.
Understandable.
And moving on, since we are going from bottom to top, me and Jake are both wearing our Cubs hats because we're talking Chicago Cubs. They had one of the most prolific off seasons in terms of just signing a volume of guys is what it felt like. So let me run down the large laundry list of players that they all signed. So they added, of course, Cody Bellinger, Jameson Taillon, Brad Boxberger, Dansby Swanson, Tucker Barnhart, Drew Smiley, Eric Hosmer, Trey Mancini, Michael Fulmer, and Edwin Rios all through free agency. And they also claimed Julian Merriweather on waivers from the Toronto Blue Jays. The subtractions, the big one, Wilson Contreras. They lost Wilson Contreras to a team we're going to talk about here in a minute. They also lost Wade Miley to another team we're going to talk about here in a minute. Alec Mills, Jason Hayward, and Rafael Ortega. Yeah, I mean, the Cubs signed, it felt like everybody under the sun except for the big name, and they finally got it with Dansby Swanson. I think they had a really good offseason, but as always, I will let you go first. Mr. Temporary Cubs fan with the hat, Jake Crum.
Hey, man. This is like the situation where you see a guy wearing a hat from a team that's not in the area, and you're just like, bro, whoa, are you a baseball fan? And we're like, oh, this is a baseball hat? No, I just sort of liked it for the aesthetic. And I'm always like,
I talked to a dude one time that was literally wearing a Cubs hat, a Cubs jersey, and he was wearing a Cubs trainer jacket, like one of the big, really nice ones. Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Oh, you're a Cubs fan? How do you think they're going to do this season?" He's like, "Oh no, we just came back from Chicago and I got all this stuff." I'm like, why do you have this? Why couldn't you just do the one thing? He looks like he's the biggest super fan in the entire world. Uh-huh. Dude's wearing that's an entire Cubs gear. Probably. It's so aggravating.
Yeah, there's a guy at my work today wearing an Orioles hat, and I was like, he does not look like a guy that likes baseball, so I'll just leave him alone. But yeah, It's a big problem. So just because I'm wearing this hat doesn't mean I like the Cubs, but it does mean I like baseball. Speaking of the Cubs, they had a great offseason, I think, just because they got a bunch of guys, to be honest. They said, here, spend the money, and they spent the money. That's sort of the best you can do. And I think that's what keeps them from S tier. This wasn't like we made a bunch of crazy moves that like you couldn't see coming. I think, honestly, what keeps me from S tier is the lack of trades. I feel like if they traded some prospects and they sort of went really all in, which you hate to trade prospects, especially at this point in the Cubs, whatever
retool,
mode they're in.
rebuild,
Yeah.
whatever they're
It's just like,
calling it.
they have a ton of prospects, but you don't want to get rid of them right now because this whole add a bunch of free agents could be bad. And then your whole future is messed up if you don't trade anybody. But the fact that they weren't 100% in and were sort of 85 to 90% in, and they were just like, let's spend a bunch of money and see if the team is in a spot to contend, sort of rubs me the wrong way. Like, I love that they want to be competitive. I love that the owners want to spend money. Those owners are known to be stupid in lots of circumstances, but I'm glad that they still went out and got some guys. I think the additions that they made are awesome. I think everybody and their mama wanted Cody Bellinger on their team. So that's a great addition. Probably the highest ceiling of any free agent, in my opinion, because he is a former MVP award winner. They got some really solid guys as well. Jamison Tyone, I think, is really solid. He's not like an all-star level pitcher, but he's very solid. And the same can be said for guys like Trey Mancini and some of the depth guys that they got, where they're very solid. They're not going to be all-stars. They're not going to be guys that are going to be the difference maker, but as a whole, they can really bring up a team. And then you get the big guy, Dansby Swanson. You bring him in, and that's like one of the new faces of the franchise. He's going to be around for a long time. I don't think he's as good as he was last year, but I think that's still fine. He's really good. He's former all-star. He was a former number 1 overall pick. There's a possibility that he gets better still. I mean, he's still only 29, so like there's still a little bit more of a ceiling left, possibly, but I think he's just going to be very good for most of the time of his contract. And for this year, I think that only continues. And they didn't really lose anybody outside of Contreras. I'm not really worried about the other guys. We've talked sort of extensively about Jason Hayward going to the Dodgers and having a 6-WAR season or whatever. But Wilson Contreras, that's the big one. That's the guy you didn't want to lose. And it sort of shows in the fact that they had to replace him with like Tucker Barnhart. Like, that pitching situation is now pretty bad. And I think Wilson Contreras was a fan favorite for a long time. I don't know if this was like a money thing, but the fact that he went to the rival Cardinals sort of makes you feel like it was a money thing, like the Cubs didn't want to pay up, and he left town. Like, he loved playing there. They didn't trade him at the deadline. Why would they just let him walk? There had to be some differential there on the contract discussions, but I think this is an A off season just because they went out and they got a bunch of guys. They improved the team a lot. They're actually trying, but it's not an S because they didn't go 100% in.
Yeah, I think I'm really, really favorable towards A as well. They missed out on the top tier guys, and that was a little frustrating because everything has leaned towards, since they traded everyone away, the Cubs have never said, any of their leadership team brass have never said anything about a rebuild. They've always said that they want to put together a competitive baseball team, and last year was absolutely not the case. They had no intention of putting together a competitive baseball team, and that showed with their offseason last year, where they added like Stroman and nobody else. And they added Seiya Suzuki, but that was it. And that one was frustrating too, because, you're half-assing it. This one, they were like, okay, last year we got a bunch of flack because we didn't sign enough guys. Let's sign all the guys. I really like the Bellinger signing. He homered today, which was very nice. Jamison Tyone also, he's been a rock steady starter. They really needed another starter, but now they sort of have like a log jam. I really like the trade bit you put in there too, because they have like a log jam of prospects that are starter prospects. And now they don't have a whole lot of openings in their rotation really to fit them. They've got like Caleb Killian, Hayden Wesneski, Ben Brown, and then that's just the top end. They have 3 that they have to fill spots for now. And I honestly just don't see that happening. But they didn't make a big trade. And it's annoying because they let Contreras walk. And that was absolutely a money thing. But I also think Contreras kind of always had an ulterior motive to want to go to the Cardinals. He always talked up Yachty, always talked up wanting to be like Yachty. I think that was kind of written in the cards for him, that he was going to try to if the option was there, he was probably going to try to go to the Cardinals, which, if that's your dream move, that's your dream move. It hurts my feelings a little bit, but and I hate him now for it. In a way, I still obviously appreciate what he did. But yeah, they signed a lot of guys, and I think that was good. But they missed out on the top end. Correa has basically been begging to be a Chicago Cub for a while. He literally, they needed a shortstop. It's their biggest opening. They had the money because they paid less money than that to Swanson, and maybe they did their due diligence, and the injury thing was a little bit scary. But Correa basically asked to be a Cub, and they just didn't do it, which it is what it is. They get Dansby Swanson. I really like their infield defense now, and they're sort of following a mold, and it's been very clear what they're doing with that. Their entire goal with building their team was they're building on pitching and defense. All of their pitchers sort of fit a mold, and they're trying to use their young pitchers to sort of fill in those gaps, like Wisniewski, like Killian, potentially like Brown. Brown had a really good outing like 2 days ago, but they're trying to fill the spine of their team with really good defense. You obviously see that. Bellinger's a Gold Glove caliber center fielder. Nico Horner's a Gold Glove caliber shortstop. That's now going to play short. That's now going to play second. Dansby Swanson, obviously really good fielder at short. So the middle defense of your team, really good. They have Seiya still. They added Mancini because their offense was pretty bad last year. The catching situation is god awful. Tucker Barnhart and Jan Gomes are currently their two starters. Both of those guys will be lucky if they're hitting remotely close to half decent league average is what I would think. And that was frustrating because Sean Murphy got acquired for a bag of Funyuns and a bucket of baseballs, and they had more than enough prospects to beat what the Braves offered. Mm-hmm. And they just didn't. And that's really annoying because they could have really made what I think is even bordering on, I would maybe give it an A- if we were doing those tiers, because they had the potential to keep the top end of their farm and make trades for guys that make their team immediately better in the meantime. They should have looked at how their division was stacking up, because we'll talk about them here in a minute. The Brewers didn't do that much. The Pirates and the Reds are more of down in the doldrums. And then the Cardinals literally only signed one guy. They could have made a couple moves or one relatively big move and kept the top tier of their farm system, like Brendan Davis, like Kevin Alcantara, like Pete Crow Armstrong, and they could have got a Sean Murphy. They could have got somebody else that makes their team infinitely better to where they'd be competing for a wild card spot, probably at the bare minimum, is what I'd have to think. They made some good additions. And they made some smart additions too. Obviously the big sexy moves are Dansby Swanson, Cody Bellinger, Trey Mancini's getting his flowers as well too. But Drew Smyly has been very good in a variety of roles. Brad Boxberger's been a super solid reliever. Edwin Rios is a lottery ticket. If he pops, he could be a pretty good player. And then they added in waivers, their bullpen looks really solid on paper with Julian Merriweather and especially Michael Fulmer, because the Cubs have been working with slider guys for a while. He's added a different slider. So now he literally throws two separate sliders. He has a gyro slider because he's always had it, and now he has a sweeper slider, which looks absolutely filthy. I don't know if you've looked at any Fulmer clips so far that have been circulating on Twitter. He's disgusting. He's absolutely disgusting. So they've added some guys to their bullpen that really look good. Other than Contreras, they didn't lose anybody. I mean, Miley was more of a non-factor last year. Alec Mills is Alec Mills. I mean, I don't know what you really want. Rafael Ortega was pretty bad last year, and you did your buy or sell, and he was one of the clearest sells before the season started. Little segue there. But yeah, Ortega was nothing. Jason Hayward, thanks for the memories, but it's time to say goodbye. So yeah, I would give this a low A, one of the lowest A's I can, because it was so good. They added a lot of guys, but it could have been so much better. You called it a 90% all the way in. I think it's more a 75%, maybe 80%. There was so much more room for them to add and make their team good. And it literally is they signed a bunch of guys and then they did absolutely nothing for 3 weeks. And then all the big name guys sort of fell off the board. They basically ended up with Swanson because if they didn't get Swanson, there was going to be a fan mutiny because they had no reason to not be in the shortstop market. They have shortstop prospects, but they're all low A or high A level. I like Ed Howard and I think it's Christian Hernandez. And Hernandez is even sort of staggered a little bit or stagnated a little bit. So it could have been a lot better. They could have made big trades and kept their Brennan Davises, their Pete Crow Armstrongs, their blue chip prospects, and they just didn't. So missed opportunity, but still not bad is what I would think.
That's really long. I'm happy for you.
Very long.
Sad that. Sorry
I
that
ain't
happened.
reading all that. I ain't reading all that. I'm happy for you.
Exactly.
Or I'm sorry that happened. Yeah, Cubs could be good. They could be pretty mid, and that's more or less what this one's going to be. Same thing too. Talking about the Pirates is they added guys like Mancini who could be good. He struggled a little bit when he went to Houston, or he was a little bit better with Houston. He obviously kind of didn't really do a whole lot with the Orioles because they completely hosed all right-handed hitters with their stupid stadium changes. But now they have guys like Mancini, like Hosmer, that these guys are going to get at bats. And if they're not good, it also kind of needs to be remain to be seen. They need to cut bait on them quick if they're not good, and they need to be getting at bats for young guys, which the Cubs, given their track record, also won't do that. So that's a little frustrating as well.
Yeah.
Rant over. So now we can move on to teams that I don't care nearly as much about, coming from a Cubs fan perspective. And this is talking about the Milwaukee Brewers, who sort of felt like this was make or break a little bit in their offseason, at least in my mind. They retooled a little bit at the deadline, and I think it sort of messed with their team chemistry because they suffered a huge fall off in the second half after the deadline and plummeted out of the playoff picture entirely. And this felt like okay, we need a tour de force of an offseason to get back to where we were to compete with the Cardinals, because it felt like the Brewers went from being really, really good and the de facto best team in the Central to God, they just are never going to catch the Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's how it felt for you.
Yeah. Definitely felt like they were the clear-cut best team in the Central, and the Cardinals have sort of come out of, I don't want to say nowhere, but they seem to have figured out the plan over there. And while the Brewers are sort of faltering and sort of feel like they're slipping into the next phase of their franchise.
Yeah. So the Brewers took them a while, but they did finally make some additions to their roster. A plethora of trades. They added Javi Guerra, Abraham Toro, Jesse Winker, William Contreras, Owen Miller, and Bryce Wilson, all through trades. They added Wade Miley, Brian Anderson, Justin Wilson, Luke Voigt, and Tyler Naquin through free agency. And then their subtractions, a laundry list. They lost Jace Peterson, who was the biggest addition to Jake's Oakland A's, Taylor Rogers, Omar Narvaez, Andrew McCutchen, and Brad Boxberger. All of those lost through free agency. They lost Brent Suter to waivers, which is very nice if you're a Cubs fan, because he just dogged the Cubs every time they played him. They also traded away Hunter Renfroe, Colton Wong, and Esteury Ruiz. Didn't extend anybody. No extensions for the NL Central at all.
Correct. Yeah, they're not a. I don't know what it is. Extensions are weird. Nonetheless, I'll talk about the Brewers. This is a weird offseason for me. I think we've seen the parallels between the Pirates and the Reds. The Cubs are sort of their own situation. And then the Brewers are in a weird situation where, like you said, fell off in the second half. They were long the premier team in the division, and now it doesn't feel that way. So what you would have expected them to do is have a big, slam your fist on the table off season where you show everybody who's boss. They've got a great front office, in my opinion, that does a great job at doing the most with the amount of money that they're allotted. And we've seen that pay dividends in recent seasons as they've been really successful. And it doesn't quite feel like they did that. If you just look at the additions, you're like, okay, yeah, they added some great guys. Jesse Winker is sort of up in the air. We're not really sure what he is outside of Cincinnati. We're not really sure what he is as a teammate either. I saw questions around that. They added some guys that could have bounce back seasons. Luke Voigt and Brian Anderson are guys like that. And they also just added a bunch of depth guys, which is sort of weird. I'm leaving one of those out of there because I want to use it as a separate point. But yeah, they added some guys, they added some depth, but it wasn't like this is the big offseason we have to like reassert ourselves as the dominant team in the division. And then that's just the additions. The subtractions, they lost a lot of guys. They traded for Taylor Rogers at the deadline. They traded Josh Hader away for Taylor Rogers and Esteu Ruiz. Then they lost Rogers in free agency and traded away Ruiz. The Ruiz trade by itself, that one's fine, but like they lost a lot of big guys, not only Rogers and Ruiz, but also their catcher Omar Narvaez, Andrew McCutcheon, a couple of bullpen guys, and then two like key members of the lineup in Hunter Renfroe and Colton Wong. Now, is Jesse Winker a better player than Hunter Renfroe? That's a big question. I don't think so. I think Renfroe's far and away better than Winker. Maybe on the offensive side, it's close when Winker is at full health and is performing 100%, but with last season, it's not even close, especially because Winker is an awful defender, and Renfroe's a gold glove type guy. And for Colton Wong, it's sort of just, yeah, we're going to allow some space for our prospects to come up and play second base. I think Bryce Terang is penciled in right now at second base. Yeah, that's true. And they still got like Keston Hira to platoon with him.
He's still
so, yeah. So it's sort of like they sort of just shuffled the team around, and the only thing that makes up for it is that they snuck into that Sean Murphy trade and came away with one of the biggest heists I've ever seen. They got rid of Esteu Ruiz, who was sort of a hyped prospect in fantasy circles because he's really fast and he stole like 80 bases last year. But I don't think he's that good. I think he's a really bad hitter. I think he's got a noodle for a bat, and I think he's also just not a good elsewhere. And they somehow walked away with an all-star in William Contreras. So that's a great replacement for Omar Narvaez, but that's sort of the only good thing they did, because I think the rest of the moves that they made are just shuffling the team around, where it's like you lose a guy, you try to replace him, you move the money around, you're looking at contracts, like who's going to be around, who has more club control and that kind of stuff. So it sort of just feels like they shuffled the team around, didn't really do much. And so I'm sort of leaning C. Like if you just think about like the volume of moves that they made, you can sort of lean B. But when you start to see that they just made a bunch of trades, and it wasn't like trades of prospects for major leaguers, it was trades of major leaguers for major leaguers, it's just shuffling. And they were the last team to sign a free agent, and that first one was Wade Miley, and then they followed that up with Brian Anderson, who's their biggest free agent acquisition. So yeah, I'm not really sure what they did or what their plan was, because they really needed to go out and show the division who's boss if they wanted to catch the Cardinals, and they didn't get anywhere close to doing that.
Yeah, it's a perplexing offseason because it really felt like it has to be it. Like a lot of the issues with the Brewers sort of permeate. A lot of the guys that have been a big part of their roster construction are either kind of withering away, like Christian Yelich. It's like we don't really know what Yelich is now going to be. Like, is he ever going to return to what he used to be? Probably not. Is he ever going to be a really, really productive hitter again? Probably, but I don't think he's going to be anywhere remotely close to what it used to be. They really did steal William Contreras, which is good because he's only 25. So, and he's got a lot of control. So they'll have him. But Brewers catchers tend to have a little bit of a decline offensively when they end up going there. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's some sort of weird bad juju. It sort of happened to Grandal, and then it sort of happened to Omar Narvaez, where he just kind of had like weird peaks and valleys where he'd be productive, and then he just completely just doesn't do it anymore. So hopefully William Contreras can buck that trend. They only really added guys on one-year deals through free agency. They didn't add like anybody. So they added 3 guys. They signed multiple free agents, and they're all on like one-year deals. I think they signed 3 free agents. They signed 3 free agents. Sorry, 4. I think Naquin, I don't really even count.
Well, only 2 of them were major league deals.
Yeah,
Brian Anderson and Justin Wilson. 3 of them were major league deals.
Yeah, they got Wade Miley, Brian Anderson, and Justin Wilson. So all of them are on one-year deals, and then Voit and Naquin. Like those guys, what do you really have with them? Do you really know? Their roster is just still not great. There's a lot of holes. They didn't really catch up any ground. It felt like they just more or less kind of stayed the course. And this sort of needed to be like a big year and maybe they're saving money. Maybe like they didn't want to spend a lot of money this offseason too. and try to re-sign Corbin Burns or something. But Burns is pissed off with the franchise too. I don't know if you've seen those.
They're not trying to re-sign Corbin Burns.
They're not going to be able to. Did you see the video where he's
Yes,
pissed off
that's
with the
because
franchise?
they're not going to try to.
Yeah, the Brewers are run so like their front office is so good at doing with what they have, and it's so obvious that they just have no help from ownership to try to accomplish anything. The Brewers are treated like, and I hate it for them. Like the Brewers are treated like the smallest of small market franchises. Like they don't have two damn dimes to rub together, and they just have to make do with what they have. Like they develop talent from their farm reasonably well. It's like not any better or worse than other franchises. And they made a good trade with Yelich. They gave him a lot of money. But what are they expecting? Yelich to hit 58 home runs until he's 55? I don't think so. It's just like their ownership just has no interest in helping them consistently be a good baseball team. And it really showed with this offseason for me.
Do you think the NL Central has the worst group of owners in baseball?
Oh, man. Yeah, I do. I really do. Just because, honestly, from Bob Nutting and the Reds, it's already right there. Like it's up there with the worst of the worst with Bob Nutting. And I don't remember the guy who owns the Reds, and that's probably for good reason. The Ricketts family flat out sucks. And then the Brewers, I don't like the Brewers, but I genuinely feel bad for Brewers fans who have to kind of sit through this because they're run like they're poorer than the A's at times. And that's really annoying because I know they're not. Milwaukee has they have good fans. Don't get me wrong. Like they're run like they're poor as hell and they can't do anything about it. Cardinals have good owners, but really, yeah, I think
doesn't make up for 4 bad owners.
Yeah, they have absolutely miserable ownership in the NL Central. I'm leaning towards probably a C, maybe a D. Oh, we can't even do D. We're not doing D tier. I'll give him a C.
Yeah,
I'll give him a C. It's just so uninspired. It's like the biggest word that I am thinking of is just uninspired.
Yeah. Just holding that middle ground when they need to. This could be the last year that the last or second to last year that they are able to compete.
Because their farm system at the top end isn't really good. I know Jackson Churio is on the way, but by the time he's realistically up with the big league team, the Brewers window is very much slammed shut for me. The rest of the guys they have kind of profile, at least for me, is more maybe Sal Frelick looks pretty good, but Garrett Mitchell, Bryce Terang, those aren't guys that are really going to be yeah, this is a superstar in waiting. I just don't really see it.
Done for.
Yeah. Stick a fork in them. Moving on, I think this is probably going to end up being the champion of the Central again, even though they had a very, very short list of guys signed and going out the door. The St. Louis Cardinals had one big addition. We already talked about it. They added Wilson Contreras to free agency. And then, of course, he's replacing the retired Yadier Molina, who rode off into the sunset with Albert Pujols. And then they also lost Corey Dickerson, Jose Quintana, and Alex Reyes to free agency. Like we previously said, no extensions here.
This offseason is so funny. They did
nothing.
They got one guy. They
got one guy. And they're okay, we're done.
Yeah, I think we did it right. Just Yadier Molina is the only guy we lost. Honestly, I'm fine with it. They have a logjam on their offense, so just filling that catcher hole is all they had to do on that end. They've got enough prospects. Their offense is actually really good, and that park is holding them back. I hate to talk so glowingly about the Cardinals with you here, but I'm gonna have to. Their offense, I think, is really good. The fact that they've got Dylan Carlson, Lars Nootbaar, and Tyler O'Neill with Alec Burleson, and then that leaves out there who could possibly be the best player on the team next year in Jordan Walker. The outfield is awesome, and then that's also just not even close to how good the infield is with Arenado, Goldschmidt, and whoever's going to play shortstop, Tommy Edman and the second baseman. I'm not sure what they're going to do there, Brendan Donovan or Nolan Gorman or whatever. And they still got Juan Yepez, who was like one of the best minor league hitters in 2021. That offense is incredible. And the fact that they added Contreras to that to replace Yadier Molina is great. Obviously, the defense isn't the same, and the leadership and the sort of franchise legend nature of it is not there. But Wilson's a way better hitter, like 50 times better than Molina. So that's just going to be a huge boost to the lineup that was already pretty solid. And since that's all they did, obviously you look at their bullpen, you look at their rotation, you're just like, eh. But you do have to remember they added Jordan Montgomery at the deadline last year. Got Wainwright around. Mikolas was actually pretty solid last year, and Jack Flaherty's returning from injury, and they do have some pretty solid depth in the minors in terms of starters like Matt Liberatore and Zach Thompson, who both pitched for the team last year. So I think the rotation's pretty solid, and the bullpen, they've done a pretty good job of just turning random relievers into elite guys. I mean, they've got Helsley and Gallegos, and it's sort of all you need. They're not going to pitch all the innings, but you can sort of cover the rest with just random dudes. So it's not like they really needed to add too much. They could have added another starter. There weren't a ton of amazing starters out on the wire, and they did add one at the deadline, and they're hoping for injuries to keep Flaherty in there. So I don't think they really needed to make a big addition. Hope maybe some better relief pitching depth, but I felt like the only hole they had was catcher, and they filled that with the best option, and then they called it a day. And I'm sort of fine with that, to be honest, because they didn't lose anybody that I'm crying over, because Quintana was a midseason addition. Alex Reyes is never healthy. Corey Dickerson's washed, and Albert Pujols and Molina, they're 500 years old combined. So not really much you could have expected. I sort of want to go B just because they did what they needed to do and then called it a day. But also I feel like they didn't do a lot, and you're still trying to hold on to a division. And the fact that they only made really one major move has me leaning towards C. This would be like a B minus or C plus for me, just like on that, like a 79, 80% in class. I'm going to go C just because of the volume, but I really don't think that there was much else that they could have done except for getting another reliever.
Yeah, I think I'm more or less in the same boat as you. Obviously, it hurts and to lose Wilson Contreras as a Cubs fan, but I'm gonna try to look at it as like an objective, like an analysis, I guess. Obviously, their offense is absolutely loaded, especially on paper. I think one of the only real holes that they have is I think Dylan Carlson is still currently penciled in as a starter, and that guy just sucks. So I don't know what the deal with him is. They probably needed to cut bait. If they could have improved on him, I'm sure they would have, but there's also a good chance that like he just might lose his spot. Like Jordan Walker genuinely just might take his spot. Is honestly what I would expect. I think they probably could have done with another starter. Matz is very okay. Flaherty's been struggling with injury. Adam Wainwright is a million years old, but he's still effective. And Miles Mikolas is also kind of aging up there. I think he's in like his mid 30s now.
Yep.
So yeah. And then the only other thing that I think they really should have done is add relievers. I think they have one, I think they only currently have one lefty in their bullpen, and it's Genesis Cabrera, and he's okay, but he's not really anything.
He cannot throw strikes.
No, he's very all right, but he's currently like the worst reliever in their pen, and he's their only lefty. I think if they were going to improve anywhere, to really try to push to win a World Series, because like the Cardinals are really good. Like, and I can say that, the Cardinals are very good. Their offense is very strong. Like, it's very strong. One of the best in the league on its day. Obviously, it's buoyed by star power, and then Jordan Walker is going to be really good. Lars Nootbaar is like one of the biggest like breakout candidates into like on like projection basis. Their offense is really loaded. Their bullpen is very average outside of the back end.
It's really good on. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Outside of the back end, their bullpen is super average.
Yeah.
They don't have any other guys really outside of like Gallegos and Helsley that really are
Jordan Hicks.
Well, they got Hicks too. I'm not really insane on Hicks because like
come on, man. He throws the ball fast. That's all that matters.
He throw the ball real fast, but he's also been struggling a lot with injury. And I want to see him actually pitch a full season without imploding before I'm like, oh yeah, Jordan Hicks is nuts. Like he's going to be a high leverage reliever but it's a guy that his like the max innings he's thrown is 77. He did it in his rookie year, and then he's really only had one other season where it's been remotely close to full volume. I want to see his arm actually withstand a season or maybe two. Imagine that in a row.
Last year was stupid. They tried to make him a starter, and I think that screwed him up.
Yeah, it kind of blew him up. So hopefully they can get more out of Hicks. The back end of that pin is really good. I just would have liked to have seen them if I'm a Cardinals fan, add to it, because I think this team is really good, but I don't think it's win a World Series good.
I mean, you can only really nitpick on the team right now, right? It's not like they have such egregious holes that it's just like, oh yeah, the lightest part of any team, the front end of the bullpen, that's like the worst part of the team.
No, that's the one thing though. If I was the Cardinals, I would have liked to have seen more in the bullpen, maybe a starter, and then if you can improve on Carlson, because like I think they're on like roster resource, it's like currently like Donovan. Let me see. Like, let me go look at it again.
For
it's
the
like Brendan.
Or what?
Just in general, like their order 1 through 9 is like Edman, O'Neill, Goldschmidt, Arenado, Contreras, and then it's like Carlson, Nootbaar, Yepez, and Donovan. It's like Yepez was really good in the minors, but you also kind of need to rely on him doing it again in like the big leagues. Donovan also like an older kind of Cardinals Devil Magic rookie, and then like I said, I think Dylan Carlson is garbage. So I would have liked to see them add another bat.
Jordan Walker. You got Jordan Walker, exactly.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit
Gorman
more.
could be sick.
Gorman could be good.
And Alec Burleson, I think, is really underrated as well. He was really good in the minors, and he sort of just doesn't have a chance with so many guys on the team. But yeah, I mean, you've got to be pessimistic. You're a Cubs fan. You're obligated.
Well, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm actually going to give them a better grade than you gave them. I think it's a B offseason.
Okay.
I think it's really good. It's just I think they could have made moves that put them into for me, the Cardinals feel like a really, really good team, but they don't feel like a team that's like, this is a team that could genuinely run away with it and win the World Series. It feels like a team that
the rest of their division makes them look really good.
Yeah, the rest of the division makes them look really good. It doesn't feel like this is a team that's going to like barnstorm their way into a World Series. That's my issue. I think the Cardinals are currently with their roster construction at the stage where they need to be looking to try to win a World Series and looking towards like, this is the team we need to be dominating with in the playoffs, because they'll beat the hell out of the Central. Let's be honest. The Central is not good. Like the biggest threat to it is the Brewers, who are on a decline, and the Cubs, who are at a weird sort of like fork in the road where they're at. The Cardinals are a team that I think should be trying to win a World Series with what they currently have. And this doesn't feel like a team that really has it. It kind of feels like they could maybe make an NLCS, and then that's it. I think they'd probably lose to whoever they'd face there. And that's the only real nit I have to pick. I'm not going to deride them and be like, oh, Cardinals suck because they only added one guy. The one guy they added is really good. Their farm system is really good. The back end of their pin, really solid. They could have made it even better, could have made their rotation even better, could have added another impact bat. And then you have a guy like Brendan Donovan or Juan Yepez on your bench as depth options with Nolan Gorman, who could be really good, instead of like, let's trot out Dylan Carlson, who is not good and has never really shown at a big league level that he is good. That's my only gripe. If I'm a Cardinals fan, I think they could have done a little more.
This doesn't help their offseason, but I really think this is a situation where they have so much depth with young guys that are unproven, and they have so many prospects that they're going to either get a starter at the deadline or get a reliever or two at the deadline, and then they're going to look really
They'll look really, really good. But they could have added some relievers now and then added
I just don't think that they're worried
at the deadline.
They're just not worried about winning the division. They like feel like they're shoo-in to win the division. So why do that now? Sort of see where you're at, see which guys you want to get rid of after a couple months, a few months. Then you can sort of have a better feeling of who needs to go and who needs to stay. And then from there you can really improve the team. But yeah, that doesn't influence their offseason grade. So like, yeah, it's not going any higher than B, but yeah, I think is a very solid offseason, especially like this is the best you can do, only signing one guy.
Yeah, I honestly struggled with leaning towards almost giving it a B+ or an A, just because they had one big hole and they filled it with the best possible free agent. I genuinely don't like, if if you're a fan of a baseball team, that is like the best situation you can hope for. And they do have a million guys in their farm system that they're going to have to try to get playing time for. Jordan Walker is not a guy that you're going to trade. They might trade Mason Wynn. I can't imagine he'll actually end up getting any burn. But I don't know. I really almost gave this one an A. So yeah, take that for objectivism.
All right. Yeah. Unbiased baseball reporter, Davis Bird.
That's me. I'm going to put it as my title instead of Craig Jumpler. But on that note, that I feel like I've talked for the vast majority of this podcast, and I hate that. But as always, we end off every single podcast with a trip down. I was going to say like memory lane, but I didn't watch this dude.
He literally retired the year I was born.
Yeah, I think he did for me too.
You were 96.
So this guy retired the year that we were born. So I absolutely not.
I was 97.
Oh wow, Jake's a youngster.
Everybody. I'm a baby.
Yeah, but we always end every podcast, as always, bring in a closer from baseball's past to take a little history lesson with Mr. Jake Crumpler, baseball historian.
Yes, sir. And if you want somebody to blame for the delayed start to the podcast, you can blame Lee Smith, who is our closer for this evening. Lee Smith had an 18-year career from 1980 to 1997, during which he pitched for the Cubs, Red Sox, Cardinals, Yankees, Orioles, Angels, Reds, and Expos. I chose him since we're doing the NL Central offseason in review. He pitched for 3 NL Central teams. It seemed perfect. So he was drafted by the Cubs in the second round of the 1975 draft as a starter. He actually almost quit baseball because they moved him to the bullpen and he felt like it was a demotion, but he had a lot of success. He debuted 5 years later against the Braves in September of 1980, tossing a scoreless inning with no hits, 2 walks, and a strikeout. During that debut season, he pitched to a 2.91 ERA across 18 September appearances, which seems like a lot, but like if he debuted that year, like he had to have only pitched in September, but pitched a lot when he first debuted. In that debut, he featured a mid-90s heater that he released from a 6'6" frame. I think he was like 265 pounds too. He was a big dude. And he later learned a slider and forkball from Fergie Jenkins. I think he may have already had one or the other of those pitches, and Fergie sort of helped him master them. And you'll see later on, a few years later down the line, the impact those 2 pitches had on his game. But in his first full season, he saved just 1 ball game, and that season was interrupted by the strike. And that sort of gave him the time to improve, and he fully broke out in 1982, during which he tossed a career high 117 innings with a 2.69 nice ERA and 17 saves. That season, he made 5 of the 6 starts that he made in his career, so he was never really seen as a starter. I think he had a no decision in the first start, and then the next 4 were all losses. And this was a time when wins and losses were how you evaluated a pitcher. So they were just like, dang, this guy sucks. But nonetheless, that allowed him to establish himself as one of the best closers in baseball. In 1983, this could be considered the best season of his career. He tossed 103 1/3 innings pitched with a career best 1.65 ERA and a career best 1.07 whip. He saved a National League leading 29 games and also finished a National League leading 56 games. He made his first All-Star team that year and finished 9th in NL Cy Young Award voting, as well as 18th in NL MVP voting. The following year, in 1984, he helped the Cubs to their first postseason appearance since 1945. That year, he pitched to a 3.65 ERA with 33 saves. He continued that success through the next 2 seasons. In 1985, he had a 3.04 ERA, 33 saves, and a career-high 112 strikeouts. That was his first year that he really started becoming a strikeout pitcher. I think he was like 8 Ks per 9 before that, and then he started going over 10 Ks per 9. So he really turned into a big strikeout guy, which sort of is the modern prototype of relievers. He also led the National League with 57 games finished that year. In 1986, he saved 31 ball games with a 3.09 ERA. In the following season, 1987, he finally earned recognition for his success he earned his second All-Star appearance, pitching to a 3.12 ERA with 36 saves. And those 30 saves made him just the second pitcher ever at the time to record 30 saves in 4 straight seasons. He would top that pretty remarkably later on in his career. And despite being the team's leader in saves, the franchise leader in saves for the Cubs, he was traded to the Red Sox prior to 1988. I was joking with Davis before the podcast that it sounded like from the Wikipedia page that people were calling him fat, and he sort of didn't like it. So he's like, hey, get me out of here. And he proved them wrong because he found immediate success in Boston, pitching to a 2.80 ERA with 29 saves, finishing 21st in AL MVP voting. And the following season, he had another 25 save season before getting traded halfway through the 1990 campaign. That year, he was traded to the Cardinals. And overall in 1990, he had a 2.06 ERA and 31 saves. Then he had an incredible 3-year stretch for the Cardinals where he really established himself as one of the best closers of all time. So here's a long list of accolades and stats that he put up during those years. So 1991, he had a 2.34 ERA, a major league leading 47 saves, and a national league leading 61 games finished. He made his third All-Star team, finished second in NL Cy Young Award voting, 8th in NL MVP Award voting, and he won the NL Raleigh's Relief Man of the Year Award. And in 1992, he followed that up in 3.12 ERA with a National League leading 43 saves. He made his 4th All-Star team, finished 4th in NL Cy Young Award voting, and he set the NL record with 546 consecutive appearances without recording an error. That is not something I knew about Lee Smith. I think that record was later broken by Heath Bell, who closed out a previous podcast of ours. He also won his 2nd straight National League Raleigh's Relief Man of the Year award. And 1993, to cap off this trio of amazing years, he had a 3.88 ERA with 46 saves. That's 3 straight seasons with 40-plus saves. He made his fifth All-Star team and was actually traded to the Yankees halfway through the season. And he was once again positioned as the franchise leader in saves when he was traded. So he is the franchise leader in saves for the Cubs and the Cardinals. I'm not sure if that's still the case. I'm pretty sure it is. But he did become the all-time National League saves leader that year as well. And that does not still stand, but it was a great run of seasons that sort of positioned Lee Smith as one of the best closers of all times. And then he pitched for 2 different teams in 1994 and 1995. In 94, he pitched for the Baltimore Orioles with a 3.29 ERA and a major league leading 33 saves. That sounds low, and that's because that season he played through another strike. So if he had sort of continued playing that whole season, if there was no strike, I think he would have had 4 straight 40 save seasons, which I haven't checked, but that hasn't been done too often. He made his 6th All-Star team that year, finished 5th in AL Cy Young Award voting and 14th in AL MVP voting, and he won his 3rd Raleigh's Relief Man of the Year award. And in 1995, he played for the California Angels, during which he pitched to a 3.47 ERA with 37 saves. He was traded to the Reds halfway through the following season, 1996, and then he finished out his career with the Expos in 1997 at the age of 39. He saved the final 5 games of his career, and he retired as the all-time leader in career saves and games finished. I think we know the saves record is gone, broken by Trevor Hoffman and then subsequently by Mariano Rivera, but I don't know about the games finished leaderboard if that still stands. But in total, he wrapped up his career with 28.9 Baseball Reference WAR across 1,289.2 innings pitched, with 1,251 strikeouts, a 3.03 ERA, a 1.26 WHIP, and 478 saves, which is good for 3rd on the all-time saves leaderboard, trailing only Trevor Hoffman and Mariano Rivera. And he also was named to the Hall of Fame after missing out on the regular Hall of Fame ballot. The Veterans Committee voted him in, so he's actually a Hall of Famer as well.
That's so sick. He is currently still the all-time save leader for the Cubs, and he's the all-time games finished leader for the Cubs. And he's got the lead in games finished by almost 100, which is wild. They traded him because he felt underappreciated by Chicago, by the front office and the fans, and they replaced him with another all-time closer 2 months later. Would you care to guess who it was?
Bruce Sutter.
No, he was old and washed by this time.
Old and washed. I literally just read his whole thing. I will remember the name as soon as you say it.
Goose Gossage.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't.
They
That's
didn't.
not who I
Yeah,
read.
they traded for the pod. They traded the Padres for Goose like almost. I think it was barely 2 months later, and then he was really really average for them. Yeah,
Yeah.
real cool history. But yeah, Lee Smith, one of the greatest closers of all time, of course, with the Cardinals and the Cubs. So it fits the theme of the day with the NL Central. That's all we have to talk about today. Thank you for joining us for episode number 51 of the Free Baseball Podcast. As always, I'm Davis Bird. You can follow me on my Twitter at DVSBird. It's on the screen. I don't do anything on my Twitter except complain and repost stuff. But if you want to go hang out with me and talk baseball there, you're more than welcome to. If you want to follow Jake on Twitter, you can follow him at Jake Crumpler. It's his name. It's super easy. And then you can also read everything that Jake writes on the multitude of websites that man writes for, because he makes amazing baseball stuff.
Yeah, so obviously I write for the athleteshub.org. I'm hoping to put out all of my fantasy rankings this month. It's going to take a big push from me though, because I'm really busy with drafts. I'm really busy with articles that are, I don't want to say more important, but that are sort of have more of a deadline, and also I get paid for them. So I'm sort of prioritizing those over Athletes Hub ones, but I'm hoping to get out at least a couple of fantasy rankings for the Athletes Hub. But I also write for PitcherList.com, and I've been putting out some bangers recently. So if you're looking for some fantasy content or just like interesting baseball stat content, do go read those. Those are all found on my website at crumplerbaseball.com. They're also all on my Twitter at Jake Crumpler, where I've been tweeting out bangers as well. And I also write for baseballhq.com, which requires a subscription, paid subscription. But, they've got really great stuff there for people that are interested in doing really well in their fantasy leagues. And I also do a podcast for Pitcher List called In the Pen, where we talk about bullpens every week. So that comes out on Fridays. And I'm actually going to be a sneak peek. I'm going to be on a bigger Pitcher List podcast this week called On the Wire. And that's like the second biggest podcast on the network. So that should be lit.
Awesome. Make sure that you continue to check out everything on the athleteshub.org and stuff from us, just because, we're obviously trying to approach this from a baseball journalistic slant, be objective, and talk about things that matter around baseball. But we're fans first and foremost.
I hate baseball.
I hate baseball. We're the little guys. So, if you want to talk and hear things from us who are real baseball fans, like yourself, if you are watching, just stay with us. Check back with us every single Wednesday where we're doing this podcast, where we will be checking in every single week during the regular season, talking more World Baseball Classic, talking everything baseball all year. We do it year round. We appreciate all your continued love and support. That's it.
Yes. Smell you later, baseball fans.